this evening's share is in their honor, and I thank Seymour for sponsoring tonight's class. So welcome to everyone. It's Thursday night already. I can't believe it. Shabbat's almost upon us, and it's Parshat Korach. Now, Korach is an unusual Parsha to have a share which has a title called Inner Peace, because really when you think of Korach, you think of machlokas, you think of arguments. Yet tonight I want to speak about the concept of peace, shalom bayit, peaceful homes, and this is relevant to people who are both married and single. Everybody needs shalom in their life. Everybody needs peace and tranquility, inner peace. It's relevant to each and every one of us. And it's also relevant to each and every one of our relationships. You know, we all go through life and we have a plethora of relationships, whether that be professional, social, personal, spouses, whatever it may be, children, grandchildren, grandparents, aunts and uncles. We go through life and we have a lot of relationships. And we need to try and make sure that those relationships are centered with peaceful relationships. Now, of course, lockdown for many has been a very stressful time, causing a lot of anxiety for people, a lack of peace of mind. I think Rabbi Sachs describes it at the beginning. It's like the Third World War, but we're all on the same side against this coronavirus. It's a struggling time. So again, trying to calibrate and having inner peace is a topic worth considering. So this is my introduction to Parshat Korach. And tonight we're going to explore this in three ways. We're going to talk about the wisdom of the Jewish woman, Jewish wife, Chochmat Nashim. We're going to talk about the deeper concept of what peace actually means. And we're going to talk about the idea of being able to see all sides of the argument. It's not always easy to see other people's perspective, but it's a very important thing to learn. Now, I did email out the source sheet to many of you earlier. I'm going to try and share my source sheet. We'll see if this works. And if not, then we'll just use, if this doesn't work, we'll just use my explanation of the sources rather than the sources itself. So source one, for those of you who have the source sheet from the email that you received earlier today, hold on, let me just see if I can share it with you. Okay, can you see source one, everybody? I hope so. Because source one is the pasuk in this week's Sedra. By Yikach Korach ben Yitzhak ben Kahos ben Levi, and Korach took, what did he take? We'll talk about that. The Biram b'nei Eliav, v'Ain ben Peles b'nei Ruvain. The Torah introduces us to this character, On ben Peles. And what's fascinating is the Torah describes that actually On ben Peles, his name falls away. We don't hear about him when it comes to the destruction of these people. We all know what happens in the end. Korach and his congregation are all annihilated. They're all swallowed up by the ground. What happens to On ben Peles? We don't hear about him. So if you want to know what happens to him, you need to go to the Gemara in Sanhedrin in source 2. There's an amazing Gemara that I want to read with you. The Rav tells us that On ben Peles, he didn't repent on his own. Rather, it was his wife that saved him. She said to him, what's the difference to you? Either you're going to have a master called Moses or you have a master called Korach. Why are you getting involved with this argument? What is it going to make a difference to your life? And he basically responded, okay, I hear what you're saying, but it's a little bit late. You know, I've already kind of signed up to the Korach team. So what do I do now? So she says, have a seat. I'm going to save you. She gives him some wine. She causes him to get tired and drunk, and she lays him on his bed. He falls asleep in the tent. And then the Gemara describes how she sits at the entrance of the tent. She exposes her hair as though she was bathing. And anyone who comes close to the tent, they step back. And when Korach and his assembly come to collect On ben Peles en route to challenge Moses, they see that she's immodest outside the tent. They don't go anywhere near. And the rest is history, as they say, because he misses out this opportunity or terrible tragedy to be involved in this machlokas. And the Gemara concludes by saying, Chochmas noshim bonso beso, that it's the wisdom of the woman that builds the home. In other words, the Torah is making it very clear that the reason why this man was saved from being swallowed and destroyed for the rest of eternity was because of his wife. They say behind every great man, there's a greater woman. And this Gemara really lives up to that beautifully. I want to tell you a lovely story. And I heard this story from my brother, Rabbi Jeremy Golker, in the name of Rabbi Beryl Wine. Now, Rabbi Beryl Wine says, you know, all of his stories are true. Some just haven't happened yet. So take from what you want from this story, but I think it's a lovely, lovely story. The story goes as follows. Barbara Bush, and you know, Seymour, this is in your honor tonight. We've got an American sponsoring the share, so we need to bring an American story into the fold. Now, Barbara Bush was, of course, the wife of George Bush, the president of the United States. And the story goes as follows. Many years ago, they were going to visit Charleston, South Carolina, and this is the town where she was born and brought up. They were going back to her childhood town, and you can imagine the excitement that the First Lady of America, who grew up in this town, was coming to town. And there were parades and a series of events and excitement, and it was a very, very special time for this town in South Carolina. Now, the story goes that as the presidential motorcade was going through the main street in Charleston, South Carolina, the First Lady saw a builder, a scaffolder up on high, and she started waving to him. And he started waving back. And the president was getting a little bit uncomfortable. Who is this random builder that my wife seems to know? And the First Lady tells the president and says, we were kids, we were childhood sweethearts. I know this guy. We were friends growing up, we were neighbors. And I haven't seen him for many years. And the president turns to her and says, aren't you pleased that you married me and not this builder? And she turned to him and said, what do you mean? Had I married him, he would have been the president of the United States. Now, whether this is a true story or anecdotal, the message fits in with what we're trying to explain here, that behind every Jewish man, there's a great Jewish woman. Sometimes this great Jewish woman is at the forefront, but there's always a great Jewish woman motivating and inspiring their spouse. And how true this is with Om Ben Peles in our Sedra. You know, the Netziv says a lovely idea on the Posuk in Bereshis. We have an Eza Kenegdo. When we talk about marital relationships, there's an Eza and a Kenegdo. The Eza Kenegdo means, the Eza means the helper, Kenegdo opposite him. That a spouse is supposed to be somebody who helps the other one. Whether it's the wife helping the husband or the husband helping the wife, the Netziv says sometimes that spouse can be the Eza, the helper, supporting and encouraging. And sometimes it can be Kenegdo, it can be the sounding board of constructive criticism. And that is the role that we have. Peaceful homes don't always mean yes men, doesn't always mean agreeing. It means about respectfully expressing your opinion in a constructive manner. And that brings us on now to our second discussion this evening. The second discussion I want to have is about shalom bayis, about peace and peacefulness. If you look at source 6 in your source sheets, we're going to jump to source 6. There's a beautiful Mishnah, which I'm sure you are all familiar with, a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. The Pirkei Avot is the beautiful Mishnah that we actually read this time of year in the summer months. And I'll share the screen again with you. This is the Mishnah on your source sheets for those of you who have it in source number 6 from chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot. And I'll read it for you. Kol machlokas shehi l'shem shamayim. Every dispute that is for the sake of heaven, sofa lehiskayim, that will endure. She'ena l'shem shamayim, but a dispute that is not for the sake of heaven, eina sofa lehiskayim, that one will not endure. And then the Mishnah goes on to give an example. What is an example of an argument that's for the sake of heaven? This is the Zu machlokas Hillel v'Shammai. These are the arguments of Hillel and Shammai, the great sages from the Mishnaic period that they brought down in the Talmud, who they argue about many different things. You walk into a Beis HaMedrash, you see a chavrusa partnership learning Torah. They could be fiercely arguing, but it's for the sake of heaven. And they'll leave the study hall best of friends. That's an argument that endures. V'she'ena l'shem shamayim, zu machlokas Korach v'kol adaso. And such an argument that is not for the sake of heaven, which type of argument is that? That is the arguments between Korach and his followers. In other words, as Jewish people, we understand that sometimes we enjoy arguing. two Jews, three opinions, and that's okay. If you're arguing respectfully, if you're listening to the other opinion, and you're doing it ultimately for genuine reasons, not for your own ego. If I may continue now with a fascinating question. Now, it's all been a while since we've been to a good Jewish wedding. We're all missing those. Please God, soon we'll be restarting those, as it was announced this week at the beginning of July. But at wedding, you say a Sheva Brachas. One of the Sheva Brachas that you say is that we bless the bride and groom, that they should have ahava, love, achva, brotherhood, shalom, peace, bereus, and friendship. Now let me ask you a question. What is with that order? What comes first? And feel free to unmute yourself and answer if you wish. What comes first? Ahava, love, or shalom, peace? Surely, what do you think comes first? Anyone want to try and answer?
Peace.
Peace should come first, right? You sign a peace treaty with a country that you don't talk to before you start having a loving relationship, right? With a spouse, with a husband and wife, you make peace before you go out for dinner. You don't go out for dinner and then make peace. Love is only a byproduct of peace. It seems very strange in this bracha we make at the Sheva Brachot, we say, Ahava ve'achva shalom bereus. And this is a fascinating question. This was actually a question, I believe, in the name of Dayan Lopian asked this question. He was a famous Dayan in London. Oliver Shalom, we miss him greatly. He was a great posek in London. And a second question, before I answer this question, you know, another thing that, please God, we look forward to restarting when our synagogue opens is for those people who are saying Kaddish to be able to have that comfort of being able to honor their loved ones by saying Kaddish. Now, in the Kaddish prayer, I'm sure you're familiar with the expression, Oseh Shalom Bimromof, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, right? Oseh Shalom, he who makes peace, Bimromof, in the heavens. Let him make peace amongst all of us. Now, what is this referring to? Oseh Shalom Bimromof, he who makes peace up on high. What is this referring to? And why do we sing and say this every time we say Kaddish? And the answer to both of these questions about the order of the Sheva Brachot and the Oseh Shalom is one and the same answer. But there are different types of peace. The basic level of peace is a lack of war. And that's really very passive. There's no fighting. And people get on. You go on the train in the morning. People stand there. Are they best of friends? They love each other? No. Are they enemies? No. There's just passive interaction and ability to get along to what they need to achieve. The second level of peace, it's a much higher level of peace. That's when there's a perfect symphony of every aspect of that relationship. And that's what we're saying. When we say Oseh Shalom Bimromof, we're saying just like there's beautiful harmony in the natural world, there's a synthesis of nature. There's a synthesis of everything in its own way. So too, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. We should merit that we should have that same harmony in our own lives. And that's the exact same thing. We bless a bride and groom at their Sheva Brachot. We want them to have the second, deeper love. We don't want them just to have a relationship where there's no shouting and there's no strife. Obviously, that's a prerequisite. But we're blessing them, that they'll be able to have this deeper level of love and peace and tranquility, that really the Ava, the Achva, Shalom Bereus, that they'll reach the higher level of peace once they've achieved love. And that's the deeper, more profound level of peace. You know, we're approaching the 3 weeks, they're not far away. The Medrash says in Eicha Rabbah that when we pray for the temple, we're not just praying for a building to be rebuilt. We're praying for an eternal peace. And you know, it's an interesting thing. The Medrash says that had King David built the temple, it would have been eternal. It would never have been destroyed. But King Solomon built the temple. And in a certain way, says the Medrash, it was a kindness of the Almighty. Because Hashem, says the Medrash, took out his anger and wrath on the Jewish people on stones and wood, on Eitzim and Avonim. And Rabbi Leff explains that the reign of King Solomon, that was a reign of tranquility. It was one of the most tranquil times in Jewish history, and people got along. But that tranquility was passive. It was an absence of war. And King David, on the other hand, he was Rodev Shalom. He pursued peace. You know, his level of peace was different, and that's the peace that we are striving for. You know, the famous Chofetz Chaim, he used to say, every member of the Jewish people, every member of Klal Yisrael has their own responsibilities. You know, people sometimes make the mistake, they think that Judaism is a single lane highway and we all have to be doing the same thing. But you know, if you have an analogy of a construction site, if everybody in the construction site is building, laying bricks, you have a problem because you're left with a pile of bricks. You need every single type of art. You need the technicians, you need the electricians, you need the gardeners, you need the scaffolders, you need the plumbers, etc., etc. So too with the Jewish people. Everyone has a different way of relating to the Almighty. And that's the case with Judaism. It's very broad. You know, in the Torah times, you had Zachar, that was the tribe that used to learn. Zevulun was the tribe that used to do business. The Levium used to teach Torah. Everyone had a different role. In an army, you've got the Air Force, the Navy, the intelligence, different divisions. And this is what the Chofetz Chaim explains is the role of the Jewish people. And you know, there's a fascinating Gemara in Tanis. And I'll share with you the Gemara in Tanis. The Gemara in Tanis says exactly this idea, that in the future, please God, when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes and the temple is rebuilt, the Gemara describes the following. If you look at the source sheet, which should be on your screen right now, in source 8, the Gemara in Tanis says the following. Ula, in the city of Biro, said, that Rabbi Eliezer said, in the future, at the end of days, the Holy One, blessed be He, will arrange a dance of the righteous. Right? You know, when you go to a wedding and you see them dancing the horror, there'll be a dance. And the Almighty will be sitting in the center amongst them in the Garden of Eden. And each and every one of the Almighty will point, each and every one of the righteous will point to Hashem, and they'll say the famous verse that we sing on Simchas Torah, right? This is the Almighty, who we are all, the exalted one, the Lord, who we've been waiting for, who we're gladly rejoicing with. And this is a beautiful Gemara, a Gemara in Tanis, but actually it's a very profound idea. When you think of all the righteous dancing in the circle, everyone dances at a different pace, and everyone comes from a different way of life. You have Hasidim, Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi Jews, modern Orthodox Jews. Everyone is serving God in their unique, respectful way. But you know what's amazing? When you dance in a circle, everyone is legitimate and equidistant to the center of the circle. And the Gemara says that the Almighty is in the center of the circle. This is what peace is. It's being able to recognize that other people are different to you, and that's okay. We all have very different roles and ways of relating to Hashem and our Torah and our connection with Judaism. You know, there's an amazing Gemara, a Gemara in Brachos, that I want to share with you. It talks about dreams. A lot of the Gemaras in Brachos talks about dreams. And for those of you who've just been doing it in Daf Yomi, I know Gary recently finished Daf Yomi, so you'll remember this Gemara, no doubt, Gary. It's a phenomenal Gemara that describes how various symbols within dreams represent different things. And there are 3 symbols that represent Shalom Bayis, that represent marital harmony. And that is the river, the kettle, and the bird. In fact, of Aaron Feldman, the famous Rosh Yeshiva in the United States, he wrote a beautiful book about marital harmony called The River, the Kettle, the Bird. And the Gemara says that if somebody sees a river or a kettle and a bird in a dream, they will see that they will merit harmony and peace. Shalom Bayit. And the question is why? Why you're all hoping that tonight you're going to have a good sleep and you're going to dream of a river and a kettle and a bird. What on earth does that have to do with peace? And I want to explain to you the beautiful pshat, a beautiful understanding of this Gemara. What's the biggest impediment of having peace? There are 3 things. There is kina, which means jealousy, taiva, which means desires, and kovod, which means honor. Somebody who pursues a route of jealousy or constantly being focused on their desires or honor, chasing honor, these 3 items are dangerous and they are impediments of peace. And what is the anecdote? It's these 3 symbols in the Gemara. If you see these 3 things, then you'll be able to take away any type of impediment to peace. Why? Kina That's jealousy. That represents a river. What does a river do? A river stays within its boundaries. And when a river does what it's supposed to be doing, everything goes fine, everything flows normally. But if it oversteps its boundaries, it will destroy everything. There'll be floods. And so too, if you want peace, you need boundaries of how you interact with other people. But that's the more basic level. Taiva is the next level, right? The kettle, that's a pot. What does a kettle do? What does a pot do on the fire? It cooks whatever you put inside it. You want to boil up some pasta. What's the function of the pot? It's the interface between the fire and the item being cooked. The pot gets nothing out of the relationship. The pot's just going to get dirty and burnt and very hot. It represents this idea of being selfless, negating what's in it for me attitude, rather than what else you could do for other people. And finally, covered, the anecdote of covered is the bird. What's the bird? It's light, it's nimble, it rises above, it swiftly moves out the way when it needs to. And therefore, the Gemara explains, if you see these three images in your dreams, this is a symbol for peace. Now, obviously, there's a whole different discussion about dreams in itself nowadays, whether our dreams are considered symbolic at all, but this is a beautiful analogy. We started our share talking about Korach, Vayikach Korach, and Korach took. What did he take, right? He took his own role and his own desires, his own taiva, his own kinna, his own kovod, and he put it first. There's a very famous story of the Hasidic master of Isha, when somebody asked him, would you like to switch and be as great as Abraham? And Rabbi Isha beautifully replied, he said, if I was great as Abraham, what benefit would that be to the world or to the Almighty? Abraham's done his role. The Almighty wants me to be Rabbi Isha. He wants me to fulfill my role in this world. Hashem wants each and every one of us to be that Rabbi Isha. We want to fulfill what our role is in this world. You know, Rabbi Leff describes a story of a father who was sitting with his 6 or 7-year-old son. And this father, as you can imagine, I can well relate to this. He just wants a bit of time out. He wants to read the paper in peace. He wants to relax. And the kid is driving him mad. So he sees in the paper, there's a picture of the globe, of the world, and he tears it into 20 pieces, and he throws it on the floor, and he says, jigsaw puzzle, build the puzzle of the world. Within 20 seconds, this kid has finished. He said, Dad, I'm done. And the father said, how did you manage to do it so quickly? He said, well, on the back of the piece of paper, there was a picture of a person's face. And the contours of a face is so easy. You know, you can see the eyes, the nose, the mouth. It took him 1 minute to put it together. Rabbi Leff says that if you want to fix the world, you need to look at your own face first. You need to be able to recognize who you are. And that's what generates shalom. That's what generates real peace. So in summary, this evening we've talked about chochmas noshim, women's intuition. We've spoken about what peace means, about real, long-lasting peace, not just a lack of war, but actually a mutual respect and understanding of the roles and needs of other people. We've spoken about the idea of Korach, how he took for himself, but for a Jew, we need to have shalom, that really it's a selfless motivation for peace, not one based on taiva, kinna, and kovod. And I want to end with something really beautiful in the name of the Belzer Rebbe. And this I heard from my brother as well, in the name of Rabbi David Tugendhat from Hendon, who's my cousin, that when you have an argument, you need to be able to see all sides of the argument. See, the problem with machlokas, the problem with argument is you take your position and you only see your own perspective. You're unable to see the other side. And a side in Hebrew is a tzad, tzadi daled. And the gematria, the numerical value of tzad is 94. And if you could only see one side, that is bad news. If you see both sides, you get to the word pikeach, pei kuf chet, which is 188, which is sad, a side times 2. You see both sides, you become a pikeach. What's a pikeach? A wise person. But if you want to have true peace, you need to be able to see 4 points of view. You need to be able to see your own view and how the other person sees your view. You need to be able to see the other person's view and how you see the other person's view. That's 4 sides of the argument. 4 times 94 is 376, which is the numerical value of shalom, of peace. And if you're able to do that, then you are able to see a true and everlasting peace. I thank you all for coming. I'm now going to, please feel free to unmute yourselves if any of you have any questions on anything that I have said. Any questions?
Why was Korach such a rebellion?
Why was there such a rebellion altogether?
Yeah.
Well, if you read through the Chumash, basically, he felt it was unfair. Why? He was also from Shevet Levi. Why should Moshe get the leadership and also Aaron gets the kahuna? What about him? He was Moshe's first cousin. He also wanted a part to play, and he felt jealous, totally jealous. And sometimes we go through life always looking what other people have, not seeing what we have ourselves. Even though, by the way, the Gemara says he was hugely wealthy. He was tremendously wise. He had everything in the world, but he wanted more, and he was unable to feel satisfied with his own portion. But that's at the very essence of the machloket, of the story. But it's a fascinating story of human nature, really.
So Mrs. On does a great deed, Rabbi Yoni. She saves her husband from Korach's rebellion. Yeah. Why doesn't Torah mention her name? We don't even know who she is. This great woman, not mentioned.
It's a brilliant, brilliant question. In fact, this whole Gemara is only quoted in the Gemara and Medrash. We only know this from the Gemara. Gary, it's a brilliant question. I'm going to try and do some research and come back to you. I don't know the answer why it doesn't mention her name, but it's a fascinating question. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to try and bluff my way out of this one. I'm going to try and I'll try and do some research and come back to you. Good, great question.
Really, in my Siddur, that Pirkei Avot was chapter 5, Mishnah number 17, not number 20 rather.
Oh, really?
Are they not all numbered the same?
Which Mishnah are you looking at? Okay. Well,
it was chapter 5, Mishnah 20. You had number 17 on your screen.
I was looking at the Sefaria version. It could well be. But I interviewed Rabbi Nosson Sherman this week, so I could have asked him, as he's the editor-in-chief in Art Scroll.
Yeah.
It's a good one. I'm not too sure. It's a good question. Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any further questions? Well, otherwise, all I left to say is Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for coming. We're very excited to see you soon. Please God back in shul, in good health. And of course, we'll be continuing the online provision even when the shul does reopen. So thanks very much for coming. And I thank Seymour for sponsoring. And if anyone wants to sponsor the shir next week or another week in memory of a loved one or yortzeit or happy occasion, or anything at all, please let us know. And Shabbat Shalom to you all.
Thank you, Rabbi Yoni.
Thank you.
Bye,
guys.